You did mention the supply or the quantity of housing stock in Australia being restricted, and therefore the price of it, the value of it, being kept artificially high. Now, from my reading of the situation, the Australian population can be divided almost perfectly equally into three different groups. There are the people who have paid off their homes. These are each roughly around 33% of the population. They've paid off their homes. There's another third who are in the process of paying off their homes, and there's another third who have yet to, bite the bullet and put down a deposit and buy their own home. Now, the majority clearly have a vested interest in the existing price or the value of their primary asset continuing to grow up, increase. I think a lot of Australians suffer under the delusion that as long as their house price is going up, the economy is in good shape, but that's not entirely correct. Now, Michael, it's a long question, but I'll get straight to the point. I don't think many political parties in Australia are prepared to do much to significantly increase the stock of housing in Australia and decrease the value, because it would put that 2/3 of existing homeowners offside. What do you say to that?
Look, I think, Fred, your basic point around there being a bias towards wanting to see stable house price levels is true. And I would share that bias, to be frank, because not that I'm just ignoring as you say, the third of people who are renting who are not either owners or have a mortgage in the process of paying off a home. But the reality is we've seen from the US in 2008 what can happen to a financial system that's highly leveraged towards the housing market and what that can do for the broader economy. The health of, in my view, the sign of a healthy economy is not rampant house price growth. I mean, you want stable long-term growth. But what we've seen in Australia over recent years is quite remarkable growth, because we have just not had supply being able to keep up with demand. And we'll see that on steroids now over the next 5 years if the Labor Party has their way. Yeah. My approach, and I will have a lot more to say about this before the election, but my approach is we have to do something drastic on housing supply. And I can tell you, even if I was able to deliver hundreds of thousands of new homes that met the demand that's out there at a good price point for first-home buyers, that will not in any material way, in my view, impact the prices of those established homes in established suburbs throughout our country. So I don't think that you really need to pit one group against another. I know some people will instinctively think of it in those terms, but I think there is a way of drastically improving supply, opening up land for those greenfield opportunities, having density in places where it makes sense to have density. I don't think the great Australian dream for everybody is living in a studio apartment in the middle of Sydney CBD. I think for a lot of people, it's still having a backyard. It might be a modest backyard, but having a backyard, having a home. My objective is to go to the election with a serious and significant policy offering that is not fluffy, is not airy-fairy, is not talking about getting state planning ministers around a table to argue and sing kumbaya and come, because every minister has promised that and it's never happened. But actually to come up with a policy that says to the Australian people, we are going to deliver this additional supply. This additional supply will be there for first-home buyers. After all, that's what Sir Robert Menzies did. And we saw what he did, taking home ownership to record levels in this country, and doing it in a way that I think will get a lot of criticism. There will be a lot of state governments and planning ministers and state housing ministers who won't like what I have to say. But let's be frank, status quo right now, Fred, means that there will be millions of Australians into the future who never get an opportunity to own a home, and I refuse to be a part of that. And,
Indeed.
the Australian people will have a really good opportunity to vote for home ownership at the next election.
Well, Michael, who cares what the state housing ministers how they respond? It's the people who are struggling to even pay the rent these days who really matter.